like to thank the families of Larry, Glenn, Ray, and Derek for their patience during the last 2 years as we investigated this casualty. Our thoughts are with the families, and I extend my deepest condolences for their loss. The Coast Guard completed its investigation into the loss of fishing vessel Destination and its 6 crew members. The report offers details into this complex investigation, outlining the multiple factors contributing to this casualty. In the report, the Coast Guard identified the following primary causal factors: a failure of the owner to ensure accurate stability instructions were available, improper loading, the decision by the captain to get underway in heavy freezing spray conditions, and crew fatigue. In response to these and other conclusions, the Marine Board issued 11 safety recommendations and 4 administrative recommendations. Once the Marine Board completed its investigation, their report was forwarded to Coast Guard headquarters, where a final action memo was developed outlining, I'll repeat that, outlining Coast Guard actions to prevent future tragedies. I'm gonna hold on just for a second for the train. Okay.
Repeat that.
Okay. Once the Marine Board completed its investigation, the report was forwarded to Coast Guard headquarters, where a final action memo was developed outlining Coast Guard actions to prevent future casualties. The complete report of investigation addresses both direct causal factors and indirect factors involving the owner, vessel history, captain, and oversight of vessel safety, which contributed to the loss of Destination. As a result of evidence already shared throughout this investigation, the Coast Guard and fishing industry have already taken actions to improve safety. In the Commandant's Action Memo, it was emphasized that the loss of Destination and her 6 crew members were a combination of actions and events that placed the vessel in a vulnerable condition, leaving the crew with limited ability to survive given the harsh elements of the Bering Sea. The Coast Guard believes that actions outlined by the Commandant's Action Memo, together with existing regulations, will help avoid the unsafe conditions found throughout this investigation, including exceeding stability limitations. The Coast Guard has developed a standalone document, Findings of Concern, which details specific vessel stability issues that contributed to this casualty. This will be posted in the Coast Guard FOIA reading room together with this report of investigation. We know there's nothing in our report that will bring back these 6 men: Jeff, Larry, Glenn, Ray, Derek, and Kai. But we hope by using this report of investigation, we can prevent another tragedy like this from happening again. At this time, I'd like to open it up to any questions.
You talked about the stability problems with the boat itself, or was it just a loading issue of how the equipment was built?
So no structural problems. The question was about structure versus stability. There were no structural problems with the vessel. Simply some modifications had been made and some additional loading had been made to the vessel that exceeded the stability instructions that were provided in 1993. So since 1993, some changes had been made to the vessel. Those should have been incorporated into updated stability instructions that then the master could follow and keep the vessel within stability limitations.
Were those equipment associated with the crabbing, or what was that?
So yes, there were several modifications made that we know of. One was that larger, heavier crab pots were used than originally considered in 1993. Another was the addition of a bulbous bow on the bow of the vessel, and another was addition of bulwark on the bow of the vessel that changed the characteristics of the vessel itself. Yes, I'm sorry.
So you were talking about point number 2 as improper loading?
Right.
Those factors, that's what you're talking about?
That's what I'm talking about, yes. Yes. So it's changes to the vessel and also the loading of the vessel itself. So the bulwark and the bulbous bow would be the changes, and the loading would be referring to the crab pots themselves.
And of course, this is specific to that boat, that vessel.
That's right. That's right.
Could you talk about point number 3? You said the decision of the captain to get underway in spite of spray conditions. Point number 4?
Yes.
Fatigue?
Yes. So the National Weather Service had issued heavy icing conditions in that area. And so the vessel got underway despite those warnings and subjected itself to icing on the vessel. And so just like the heavier crab pots, icing on the decks and on the crab pots themselves likely contributed to a stability problem with the vessel that in turn caused it to capsize and sink.
And crew fatigue, point number 4?
Crew fatigue, yes. So we had learned that the crew was very fatigued when they left Dutch Harbor on the night before the incident. And so the crew, when icing occurs on the deck of a fishing vessel, is responsible for going out and essentially beating the ice off the vessel. And so in this case, because it was early in the morning, the report concludes that the crew members were likely sleeping and perhaps were not on the deck removing the ice that would have prevented that poor stability condition from occurring.
Were criminal or civil penalties considered in this?
Yes, absolutely. The Marine Board recommended and the Commandant concurred that civil penalty actions, a civil penalty case is appropriate, and we will be pursuing that in a separate enforcement activity.
Why not criminal?
We found no evidence of criminal activity in this case.
Going forward, how do you make sure other vessels don't overload or mess with the stability? How do you make that change so this doesn't happen again?
That's a great question. So in response to several recommendations to the Marine Board, the Coast Guard has concurred that there's some... So in response to... It's okay.
Okay, do you want to repeat your question so we can start? Well, just
Yes.
how do you going forward? How
Sure.
do you make sure the vessels don't?
So the Marine Board of Investigation made several recommendations that the Commandant concurred with. In that, we believe that more outreach and a concentrated examination program emphasizing these stability issues is appropriate, in a way that the Coast Guard can assist the vessel owner in being familiar with stability issues and making sure that he or she does update stability instructions for the crew so they can keep the vessel safe.
Are there any new regulations that are considered for adoption after the Marine Board's recommendations?
Right. So it was the Commandant's position that the existing set of regulations was sufficient to have prevented this casualty. So the missing piece here was compliance with those existing regulations.
Are there any inspections on vessels to make sure they are following this? I mean, does the Coast Guard do any inspections?
Yes, so we have a examination program. We have qualified examiners that periodically examine vessels looking for compliance with our existing regulations. And also we have a special examination called a Safety and Stability Compliance Check, or an SSC, where we specifically go to the vessel looking for overloading and stability issues that might be important to the vessel's voyage.
Had this boat been checked, or had this boat been examined?
This boat has been examined periodically leading up to the casualty. This vessel was actually offered a SSC right before the casualty, and they had declined.
So that program is optional, it's not mandatory for boats to?
Yes, fishing vessels are uninspected, and therefore our examination program is not mandatory. Our SSCs are not mandatory.
Any thoughts about making that mandatory?
So in this case, looking at the causal factors that were available here, again, the Coast Guard believes that our existing set of regulations would have prevented it. But there has been some thought over the years and proposals made for regulations for fishing vessels. But in this case, we felt that the existing regulations were sufficient to have prevented the casualty.
Can you explain the civil penalty process? Who will do that investigation?
Sure thing.
When will that be litigated?
Sure. So our enforcement action is directed by the Commandant to our local Coast Guard office in Sector Anchorage. So Sector Anchorage will open an enforcement activity. They will gather the evidence and present the case for adjudication in front of a Coast Guard hearing officer.
Can you explain what maximum penalties might be, what possible?
Sure. We can get you those enforcement guidelines, but we have policy, we have an existing framework that deals with enforcement action for civil penalties. We can get you that later if you like.
Can you help us understand why criminal penalties were not considered? You mentioned that no crime has been committed. Obviously there's even investigation of civil violations. What's the difference, and help us understand that line?
Well, in order to pursue a criminal investigation, there has to be evidence of criminal activity. And in this case, we found no evidence of criminal activity.
Do you want to ask if Laura or Hal have any questions?
Okay. On the phone, Laura or Hal, do you have any questions for me?
This is Hal.
Okay, go ahead, Hal.
Clarify the thing that was done in 2016 was that wildlife law to be done by and what aspect that calls for the
I'm
Okay, I'll get the question from him and I'll
Okay.
present it.
okay.
Why is the Assistant Commandant not here to explain the recommendations that are rejected or,
Right.
or not taken up?
So the Commandant has sent me to talk about this investigation. I am the Chief of Investigations and Marine Casualty Analysis, And so it's my program, my responsibility to assemble the final action memo, to get it approved, to brief the commandant, to brief the assistant commandant, and those processes in our organization have occurred, and they have sent me to talk to you today.
But as far as the policy decisions go, those aren't your purview, are they?
No, no, no. They are the commandant's policy decision. That's right.
How difficult was this investigation, considering the boat capsized and there was not a lot to go on?
Well, not as difficult as you might imagine, but certainly it was a year-long process. We had a Marine Board of Investigation, which is our highest level of investigation. Our maximum effort went into producing the report. We had a team here in Seattle. We did, was it 2 weeks worth of hearings, extensive testimony, extensive evidence gathering, and over the course of a year, we assembled the report. We did have other folks in the fishing vessel community that knew the crew. We had a brother that provided excellent testimony and perspective and his viewpoint. So we had some good information and good testimony that was provided. So that was very beneficial in assembling the case.
Looking at the experience of the crew and the captain, I read that the captain had at least 23 years. The
Right.
crew themselves had a lot of experience.
Right.
Going into these conditions, they were not necessarily, these were not foreign conditions to them.
Right.
They were extreme,
Right.
but they were not inexperienced. Would you
Right.
talk about that? And the fact that
I sure will.
this obviously was an operation.
Yes, from all accounts, the captain, Jeff Hathaway in this case, was very well respected in his community and by his crew. And so a good thing to keep in mind here is it just wasn't one thing. I mentioned the causal factors. It was the stability instructions. It was the decision. It was the freezing spray. So it was many things that lined up, and while there appears to be an error by the captain to sail in freezing spray conditions, that was not the only thing that contributed to this casualty.
Also, I read from another captain, he was quoted, Captain Jonathan Hillsbrand of the Deadless Catch. He said their crew dealt with very treacherous conditions during the Bering Sea, especially dangerous, that nearly took them down. And they were dealing with 200 tons of ice
Right.
at 28 hours to remove. So there were other vessels in the area at the same time battling these
Right.
conditions.
So, as you might know, conditions in the Bering Sea are very challenging. Crews and masters are against the elements, the wind, the waves, the temperatures, the ice all the time, and they're trying to do a job and trying to do it safely. So there's a lot of things to balance. With our existing regulations, the safety equipment, the stability regulations in place, the Coast Guard and our system tries to give as much room for error as we can. But in this particular case, because the vessel's stability was not as good as it could be when they sailed, they just had a very small room for error there. And that room was fully taken up by the ice that accumulated on deck, which led to its capsize.
So now you say that the Coast Guard and the fishing community have taken actions to improve safety. I mean, those regulations going to take effect immediately?
So no new regulations have come about as a result of this casualty, but our existing regulations are certainly there. And the Coast Guard, with our outreach and our concentrated examination program, hope to assist vessel owners and operators to be in compliance with those existing regulations.
Has the Coast Guard been encouraged to avoid new regulations by the administration, or?
So the Coast Guard generally will pursue those things that they feel are necessary to prevent loss of life at sea. So regulations are are time intensive, and we want to make sure that they achieve the result that they're after. So there's no prohibition per se against regulations, but we want to make sure we're doing the right thing and that it will be effective when implemented.
So you've come to conclusions about what happened. Does the Coast Guard have an opinion on the final act? Should they have been out there?
Well, the conditions that we believe the vessel were very challenging, and with the right stability instructions, with proper loading, with a crew that was not fatigued and able to keep the ice off the deck, we believe the vessel would not have resulted in this casualty. So just the inverse. If we would have removed all those factors, all the causal factors, we believe the vessel could have survived.
We have time for 2 more questions, guys.
If the Coast Guard discovers that a vessel is not following the stability procedures in line with what happened, I mean, what are the penalties, what are the regulations on that now, and how would that have been treated had it been discovered at the time?
So in this case, the stability instructions, of course, were not accurate and up to date, and there we will be pursuing enforcement action for that. But any violation of regulation is subject to enforcement activity. So in this case, we found that the master was not following stability instructions, but obviously and unfortunately and tragically the master's not with us. So we are pursuing enforcement action in this case against the vessel owner for failure to provide accurate stability instructions.
One more. Once, twice, 3 times. Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.
So let's get the mics off.
Okay. I think I'm just going to unbutton.